tremendous learning experience for me. I would say the key for you to also remember is that you bring everything that is you from all of your past experiences to the new role. And so so don't, undercut or take for granted what you've learned from those experiences that really fuel you to be even in a better position than the person who might have just lived or grown up through that particular profession.
Thank you. And they're asking us to start now.
Oh, okay.
But
so
can
we'll
I
walk
just
on.
add one thing? That was tricky for me, and I agree with you. And you should stick to your guns. It was tricky for me going from Wall Street to publishing because they pushed against, I had this very defined personality from being at Goldman, right? And going into publishing, it was like, first of all, you're not in management anymore. You're just a lowly publicist. So back off, So I agree with you 100%. You have to stick to your guns and not be afraid to do that.
Yep.
Great.
Thanks. All right, we'll go
Which
up.
way are we going?
Okay.
We'll go up.
I don't know
They
where
gotta,
you all.
they gotta tell us what.
Take two together and I'll take one on the end. The session about maintaining a championship level career. I'm very pleased to be joined by two championship ladies, Gilda Squire of Squire Media and Management, founder and CEO, Sabina Ewing, Vice President of Business Technology at Pfizer, who has obviously come with a few colleagues. All the Pfizers in the room, raise your hand. Okay. Welcome, Pfizer's in the house. We had started our session with a little casual Q&A, and depending on how our session goes today, we will do a little bit more Q&A at the end. Are we too loud? Is that? They'll close the doors momentarily, I'm sure. So we did start with a little casual Q&A, and we do have some formal questions for our panelists based on their specific experience. I want to start with you, Sabina.
Yes.
So when I read your bio, it occurred to me that you have done everything but technology, and then you have this technology title. But then when I look back through your resume, you had done all these different things with technology. And the one thing I noticed that was consistent is it always stayed close to the business. So I wanted to ask you if that attachment to the business was purposeful, if it made a difference in your career, if so, how? And how did you manage all that?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to spend time with you today. Absolutely. So I am a technologist. My degrees are in MIS and finance. I have spent my career building myself in information technology. But in this present age, you absolutely need to know how money gets made in your company in order for you to be able to add value. So irrespective of your function, you have to understand how your business works. And so what I've found is, in order to be a technologist that matters, that it's really important to not only understand the business, not at a cursory level, but more so, you have to know how you make your money. Go on a sales call with a rep. Go to a manufacturing plant. Go to a factory. And what it means for me in my career is that I sit at leadership tables and I have a voice at those tables as a business partner. So, the conventional notion of technology or an IT organization where I just tell you what to do, go in the back and build it. Do I look like somebody whose eyes hurt at the sight of light? So if you want to be different as a technologist, you have to make sure that you understand your business and actually can help them move to their results.
I just loved reading your bio and the way you flowed in and out of all of those functions and maintaining your attachment to technology. I just thought it was brilliant, and
Thank you.
I guess your success speaks to that. Don't y'all move. Gilda, I'm part of your fan club. I'll cheer for you.
I'm clear. See, I like Gilda too. We get.
What I thought the ladies would like to hear from you is a little bit about risk. I mean, you've done the corporate structure, you went out on your own, but what really intrigued me about your background is that you didn't just go out on your own into something that's tangible and solid. You went into a relationship-driven business, which is the hardest, and it's risky on its own. And then content-wise, PR is risky. Everything you do, one small mistake is huge, and it's all over the internet. So how do you think about, relate to, and manage risk? How did it feel when you were going through it, and what advice would you share with our colleagues here?
I remember when I decided in late 2007 to start my own business. I was a director of publicity at HarperCollins Publishers, big publisher, made a very good salary, great benefits, and a really great reputation. But I decided that I wasn't comfortable with the direction that books was going because they seemed to be really struggling with the whole e-book phenomenon. They didn't want to go there, but it was going there anyway. So there was this, and to your point, Sabina, understanding how your company makes money. I wasn't understanding, coming from Goldman Sachs, which was my previous life, I really didn't understand how publishing was continuing to make money, book publishing that is. And so I began to get nervous because I had started to become branded the book publicist. Like I would meet people say, oh yeah, you're Gilda, the book publicist. And I wanted to be understood as a publicist, a really good public relations representative, not just in a certain field. So I made a very calculated decision in 2007 to go out on my own in 2008. That was my Happy New Year present to myself.
But I'm going to interrupt you. That is what you did, and I love hearing that story. But some people want to know, in your heart, making a decision is one thing. I'm going out on my own. I don't like what the company is doing. How did you relate and overcome the risk? I mean, you're giving up income. You're walking away from all that you know. How did you sleep at night, knowing what you were about to do?
I slept very well at night because, again, I saw what was happening in my business, and I felt like it's riskier for me to stay.
There you go.
Because, again, the industry, coming from that Wall Street background that I so fortunately had, I looked at what was happening, and I did not see growth. I did not see opportunity for growth. And in my opinion, when you don't see the opportunity for growth, if you're no longer seeing where you fit in, you need to make a change. So I slept very well at night. Now, the people around me thought I was crazy. They thought, it's 2008, and we all remember, I think, what was happening in 2008, yep. The financial collapse was happening. So everybody thought, you are nuts, you're just gonna kind of go out there into the abyss and start your own business. But I felt confident. I had major confidence in the network that I'd built. I'd done great work over the years. I had my Wall Street contacts still. I had my publishing contacts. Agents knew what I brought to the table. Other publicists who were good colleagues knew what I brought to the table. Editors knew what I brought to the table. So I walked away understanding that I have a foundation that I've built. It's solid, and I know that the business will come. I just have to have the confidence in myself to just walk, and I did.
You know what I heard that was consistent between both of our leaders is understanding the business. Neither one of you said, here's what I was doing at my desk and what was happening. Both of you said, I saw what's happening in the business, I'm staying attached to the business. So I think one of the lessons learned is to stay cognizant of the business that you're in, the industry that you're in, the dynamics and where it's going, and that helps you manage risk and know when to move, up or out, either way.
And let me just add, my first 2 clients were from my job.
Perfect. Well, they knew you, and there was the most confidence
exactly.
right there. That's
There
excellent. That happens a lot with people who leave corporate America. I think that's another good tip, is to tap into those who know you and
That's
respect
right.
you already
That's
to
right.
start your business clientele, right? Okay, I have a question for both of you. Many in our audience have asked about how to navigate a corporate career, when to make a move, et cetera, et cetera. And so it dawns on me that people are really interested in lessons learned. So some lessons we had to learn on our own, others mentors shared with us. I want to ask both of you, what 2 things do you wish somebody had told you early in your career? Because these ladies can actually hear what they should hear early in their careers.
Sure. I think the first thing I would say is that I wish someone had told me sooner that hard work alone would not get you where you needed to be. I think you grow up in a culture where you're told that if you work really, really hard, your work will speak for itself. But that is true to a point. There's a point that you can push your way up in any organization. And once you hit that point, the only way you move up is that you get pulled up. And in order for you to be pulled up, you have to build and have relationships with people. And then that leads me to the second thing I would say is that as an African American woman, I think we can describe it as you put on the full armor, whether it's the full armor of God, whether it's your Wonder Woman outfit, you put on your full armor every day to go out into the workforce. And you actually have to let some of that guard down in order for people to actually get to know you. Because they can sense when you're not being authentic. And they can sense when they really don't feel like they have a relationship with you. Because as you progress, and how you find a sponsor is because they see that your capabilities are there, but that's table stakes. Now they need to know how you work with others. Now they need to know what that relationship looks like. How do you make other people feel? How do you get the work done? How do they feel around you? And so they need to know a little bit about you. And you got to go to those events. Early in my career, I used to say, I'm not going to that. I'm in a male-dominated profession. What am I doing at the bar? I would say, I don't play golf. I would say, they don't need to know my business.
Do you play golf now?
No, because I got a bad back, but I did.
You did? Okay.
But in all honesty, I had to do those things because it's a choice. If you choose not to go to the events so you build relationships with people, guess what? you're not going to build a relationship. So it's really, I think those two things are key for me. If I learned sooner that really relationships are a key component of advancement, and in every interaction, both in your company and outside, it helps identify a sponsor, and then secondarily, making sure that you do pull down your armor. One other thing I'll point out is, I had this discussion with Carla Harris, because she wrote this new book around, you have to build trust with people. I said, well, Carla, you just pull the guard down a little bit, because you have to still be able to shield yourself. She said, no, you got to pull it all the way down. I don't know that I agree yet with that particular philosophy. But she raised an excellent point, because she said, Sabina, that is a data point. If you feel like you let your guard down and someone hurts you or stabs you or does something that is a detractor to your experience, it is a data point. Because if you didn't learn it then, you might have been in a situation where you actually wanted them, needed them, and it was more important. And you thought they'd be there, and they weren't. But having that experience earlier was much more instructive.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you. A couple of things that you wish somebody had told you early in your career.
The first would be that it's okay to fail. That failure really is a step on the journey to lasting success if you learn from that failure. The second is that detours don't necessarily mean the derailment of your dreams. My whole career was based on detours, and at every step I was like, oh, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Why am I here? But I learned Goldman Sachs was a huge detour for me, but I would dare say that I would not be where I am today without that experience.
I'm going to ask you now to relate to the ladies in the audience, because we typically do a lot of, here's your journey. What did you learn? How was it? What can you impart? However, at these stages in our careers, things have changed so much. Today's environment is so different. And what our mid-career and up-and-comers are dealing with is different than what we dealt with. Is there anything that you could impart that would help the women in the room deal with the dynamics they're dealing with today, as opposed to what we dealt with way back in the day?
Any specific dimension?
No, anything. Well, look at the digital piece. Look at how businesses are transforming and changing while you're sitting there. You're sitting there in a book industry that was dying. They couldn't see it, but you could. And those things now are happening by the day. The mergers and acquisitions. Wherever you are working at your desks today, tomorrow, without any decision on your part, you could be working in a different company, in a different function, just because there was a merger and acquisition, or our business died because something digital came out. So dealing with the velocity of change these days, we didn't really have to do that. When you left Goldman Sachs, it was what it was. Books were what they were. Now, that's not necessarily the case. Right. So what advice can we impart as to how to navigate that velocity of change?
So I would say you have to stay current. It's really important to, you got to read, get engaged with associations and industry personnel and other networks outside of your organization. Understand what's happening in the environment. So the one thing I want to make sure, so for me as a technologist, I think every woman or every person in this room really needs to understand, even at a basic level, what artificial intelligence is and what it looks like, because that will substantially transform how work gets done in this world and what it means in your daily life. Secondarily, blockchain is not too far behind it. So it's important to understand what's happening, stay current. You need to be aware of what you're sensing with your companies. And then here's what I'll tell you. Be agile and be bold. Because when you talk about risks, so figure I joined Pfizer through an acquisition. So Pfizer is a massive company, and at the time when we were combining, it was going to be $70 billion. So I realized, what do you do in those types of situations? You know, you're a company of 20,000 people, you become a number. You have to raise your hand. So what I said to our then CIO at Wise was like, put me in, coach. Because if nothing else, I need to put myself in the game so that someone can see me and I can be able to differentiate myself from the number that someone would see on a piece of paper. And so you always want to be bold in the sense of raising your hand and seeking out those opportunities that are going to not only stretch you, but put you in position. So that would be another key piece of, awareness around what's going on.
Thank you.
And then seize the moment. You have to seize the moment as well, because the Wyeth CIO became the Pfizer CIO.
Beautiful.
And there was a person on the other side that had the exact same job I did, but he'd been there for a very, very long time. So I knew I couldn't do that. I said, put me in coach, put me in a totally different area that I have not been in, I don't know. And I trusted in myself and my skills, and I went after it. Because if you want to be a really good corporate athlete, the best corporate athletes, you want to be better every single time. You not only have the desire, you don't only have the capacity, but the ability to know that you can be even better than you are right now. So you always have to keep pushing on that.
Spoken like a true Olympian. This is how the Olympic athletes speak about their commitment to their sport.
To your right. I consider myself a corporate athlete. I'm not a runner anymore, but
Outstanding.
I couldn't put it any better than Sabina just gave you guys. I mean, the only thing I will say is that as an example in my own career, when I was at Goldman, again, that was a huge detour for me. I was very disappointed in myself because I wasn't in a communications role when I first got to the company. And I just kept wondering, where did I go wrong? I moved all the way to New York, not to work in entertainment PR, which was my dream, but to work at this Wall Street firm. And then one day I woke up and I said, you know what, enough of the pity party. I've been there for about maybe 6-7 months. Enough of the pity party. And to Sabina's point, it was like, put me in coach. I made a plan. I went through our little global directory and I said, corporate communications, public relations, and up popped a man named Peter Rose. Didn't know him from anyone, had never met him. I picked up the phone and I called him and I asked him if I could come see him. I went to see him with my resume intact. Here you go. And I said, you may not have any positions open right now, but please keep me in mind. This is what I do. I'm a public relations person. This is what I want to do. And if I'm going to be at Goldman, I want it to count. And so he looked at me and he said, oh, okay. And I said, I bet you that you probably have very few people in this firm who can do what I do. That's what I bring to the table. A year later, he remembered me. He stuck to his word and he said, I'm keeping you in mind. And he hired me into corporate communications. So I just reiterate that I'm a living example of what you just told these young ladies, that you got to be bold, you got to raise your hand, and you've got to say, I have the confidence, I have the ability, and I'm willing to be in the game.
That's great. I'd like to talk about authenticity next. So we've had several questions about authenticity, and then you just mentioned authenticity. And some of the things that have come up with the ladies in the room is that, I'm hearing about authenticity, and here I am, a mid-level manager. I don't feel the freedom to be fully authentic. That's something else you had referred to. And, how am I different from women who are leaders? Now, when you're CEO of your own company, guess what you get to be? Authentic. Everybody understands that. But when you, as leaders, would talk about authenticity, how would you put that in context for people who are not quite in leadership roles but are about to be?
So in order to get into those leadership roles, it goes back to those relationships. Mm-hmm. So I did not tell you, because I don't want anyone walking out of here saying, Sabina told me that I need to be wholly and completely myself. So if you got that tattoo right here and you've been covering it up, I'm not asking you to go put Cookie right outside, okay? What I would say is you bring enough of yourself to an organization where you feel like you belong. So I think it's Catalyst that defines inclusion as bringing your unique self coupled with a sense of belonging so that you actually can feel included. Mm-hmm. So I would say part of what I have benefited from, and by the way, there were 2 versions of Sabina. So I don't want anyone to think that I figured this out easily. There were 2 versions of Sabina. I was like a Seinfeld episode. There was at work Sabina and out of work Sabina. Okay? Because to this point, my sister used to say, oh, you got the corporate voice on, right? So part of it for me over the years was realizing that as you grow in your career, I describe it as pouring yourself into your shoes. So just like as you grow as a woman, you pour yourself into your shoes and your confidence in who you are grows over time, that will occur in your career. And you will test the waters. And in the testing, you will identify what are those things that you can do that work and those things that you can't do, because it will vary, but for me, I remember when I went natural over 20 years ago. it was not the thing to do. And by the way, Sabina, little sidebar, Sabina got braids. I had never worn box braids. For anyone who has, when I took the braids out, there was a little film on my hair, and I was like, what is that? I called my girlfriends who had braids. I was like, how do we get rid of this? They were trying to tell me all this stuff to do. I have no patience. I went to the barbershop and cut it all off. Literally cut it all off. And so I walked in. I was working at Arthur Andersen, an extraordinarily conservative accounting company. Now, I think what's beneficial is you have some laws and rules on the books that help you out. But I did cut all my hair off, and I went to little twists. And let me tell you, folks, that you got a sense that folks had certain things or certain perspectives, but the only way you figured out was when they said, oh, your hair looks really good, and you finally grown it out and pulled it into a bun, and it's no longer a little twist. But nevertheless, I would say part of it is you find it your own way by trying out different things and seeing, but not limiting, not putting yourself in a box. You have to give yourself enough freedom to test certain things out.
Okay, thank you.
I think in my experience, and what brings to mind, I think most recently I spoke with Caroline Clark about the experience with Misty Copeland, the ballerina. When she asked me to manage her, I was very concerned about myself walking through the doors of these major corporations representing her. I was still learning about ballet, so that was something, and to your point, read, learn about what you're doing, know your business. So I was still learning ballet and what it meant to be a ballerina and what her struggle meant to be a black woman in classical ballet. So to be able to represent her and sort of be a representative of her voice scared me because I didn't know how I would be received as a black woman, at the Estee Lauders and at the Under Armours. And so what I would say is, in addition to really just making sure I knew my stuff, and really made sure that when I walked in the room, I walked in the room boldly. Like I earned a seat at this table, and so did she. It helped a great deal because I just had to really work on, we deserve to be here. Why not me? Why not me? Why not her? In addition to working on myself, I also built a team around us of very capable, competent, powerful people who also represented us as a team. And so I got to the point where I had to understand, you've done all of the work that you need to do. If someone does not want to accept me, the real me, the whole me, the authentic me when I walk in the room, then that's not where we need to be.
Understood. In a minute, I'm going to open it up for Q&A, and I just want to give each of you a chance for any kind of concluding thoughts. I don't want to confine your comments to questions that I've brought, but having sat through a few days of conferences and in the sessions, and given where we are right now, are there any parting thoughts from this dialogue that you all would like to share?
Sure. So I liked the title of this session, The Anatomy of a Corporate Athlete, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, for you to feel like you're a corporate athlete or that you have a championship level career, number one, you need to know and feel that you are performing at your best, acknowledge and recognize for it, and you have the desire to be even better. And so I would say that the differentiators, I think, for a corporate athlete, in addition to what I've said, is to be bold, take risks, be intentional. I think intentionality has been a key learning for me. So I'm an extrovert, and extroverts think when they speak. But if you are an extrovert that thinks when you speak, if you spend the time actually writing down some of your thoughts and being even more intentional, you're even more effective. So you definitely want to be intentional. I would definitely say be inspiring. Be a role model for others. I love the way that Donna Brazil put it. You really do need to scoot over. If you remember, I said that people can only push their way up so far. You have to keep pulling other people up too. That's how you build a pipeline, so it's not an anomaly for you to be the only person sitting in the room.
Go Pfizer.
Okay.
I caught y'all
But
sleeping.
then the final thing I must say is you have to take time for yourself. I think Iyanla talked about that this morning. You have to refresh yourself. You have to have activities outside of work. I was sharing with these ladies that, when I left corporate America for a year to become a New York City teaching fellow, I was risk averse. I was following all the rules that everybody told me that you were supposed to follow. I left Arthur Anderson. I became a New York City public school teacher. I taught 5th grade in the South Bronx. That was the riskiest thing I've ever done. I took a pay cliff, not even a cut. I took a flat-out pay cliff. And in so doing, what that experience changed me is I became a risk taker, a significant risk taker. So I went from being risk averse to, I told them, I've been skydiving, I've been race car driving, and I'm not trying to kill myself because I have an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. But what I am trying to do is make sure that I have certain things. I took a piano, just so you can keep your brain doing something other than what you do for every day, because then you have to replenish and refresh yourself so you could be 100% to take on the challenges.
That's inspiring. I'm going to take that advice.
Because she's a hard act to follow. I am so honored to be up here with you.
Says our CEO, who's
say,
done it on her own.
She's
really?
phenomenal.
Come on
We were
now.
chatting earlier.
And as I told her when we were coming up to the panel the last few days, so many people walked up, Gilda's on your panel. OMG. So don't even try it, girl.
We know it. We know.
Miss, I'm so honored.
I would just say, don't let other people define your success. Success is on your terms.
Yes.
And whether you decide that success is based on your passion or whether it's based on the amount of money you've made, whatever it is, for me, and I know this is going to sound really crazy, I don't define my success by how much money I make or don't make. I define it on what I've built, the projects I've had a chance to work on, the authors that I've given birth to, so to speak. That's how I define my success. So when I look back and I look forward, I see this bright future just unending. And that's how I define my success. So really think about, because people will try to tell you, well, this is what success should look like for you, especially when you decide to make a change. When I decided to leave HarperCollins in 2008 in the middle of the financial turndown, everybody said, oh my God, how could you leave, this salary, these benefits, this company, how do you think you're going to be successful? Well, I'm going to define that success. You don't get to do that for me. So that's been my mantra.
There is a lesson that neither one of these women have explicitly stated, but indeed embedded in their comments. Both of them, in the course of their career, learned how to live on one whole lot less money.
Yes.
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 Learning how to live on less money is not a bad lesson.
Tell me,
right?
my husband told me, I went and I was at Saks Fifth Avenue looking at a fur coat. He was like, you are a teacher.
Reminder.
After I left Goldman and I went into publishing, which I won't call it a cliff, but it was close to the cliff. I was looking at some beautiful Chanel shoes, and my friend looked at me and said, "What are you doing? You make no money now."
You all live well.
But you know what? When you take those kinds of risks, as risky as it may seem, it opens you up to so many possibilities. It made me feel like I'm starting near ground zero, and I get to build this. And how fantastic is that, right?
Exactly.
You get to write your own narrative.
Right. Well done. Well done. Do you have any questions for our panelists? Yes, ma'am.
The mic's coming.
Oh, yeah, the mic is coming to you. Please wait for the mics. I was supposed to say that.
Hi, everyone. Carrie Ann Benjamin. I'm here from Goldman Sachs. Hey! In the house. We can talk later, if you don't mind. But first, I just wanted to thank you. I think it's been phenomenal just hearing your story and seeing how dynamic your careers have been. So thank you for being open and honest and sharing your perspective. One of the things that's been on my mind is this concept of putting yourself out there and starting to build relationships. And personally, I find it easier to take the first step, so being here and kind of seeding relationships, so to speak. But just given challenges at work and at home, I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, how do you sustain relationships? because truly these are just the beginning stages, and real relationships take time to cultivate and, really to flourish. And so just looking for any perspective and advice and what's worked for you when you try to balance all of those things. And I actually hate the word balance, but integrate all of those different elements in your life and really sustain meaningful relationships that don't necessarily need to lead anywhere, but are, make you a better person by having this interaction with this other person.
Well, I tell you, Gilda built her career on relationships, so I'll let her make sure she gives you her perspective. I will tell you this, because I have an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. You connect, when you meet people, there might be something that you connect with them on. What I found, and I was sharing a little bit earlier with folks, is the concept of initiatory reciprocity. And what that means is, if you made a connection with 1 or 2 people that you really sort of said, okay, based on, for whatever reason, you thought those 2 folks are the ones that you want to follow up with, I found that if you send something to, if you do something for them without them asking for it at all, what you'll find is that they are now inclined to do something for you. You don't have to use that equity right away. You can always call a person. There are people that I call on that I haven't spoken to for years. But based on the interactions that I had with them at a given point in time, they're willing to take that and have that conversation. And what initiatory reciprocity looks like is, if earlier in the week I had an interview with a magazine, the young woman was telling me this was her first time writing this type of piece, and this was, and I could sense she was nervous about it. And so while we had the conversation that she had on the script for that interview, what I realized is I was reading a Wall Street Journal article the next day that was on the topic she was covering. I just forwarded it to her. I said, I thought this might be helpful to you in the article that you're writing. And in so doing, I didn't think if I had done the article, I may never speak to her again. But in doing that, she reached out to me on LinkedIn, wants to get connected, et cetera. So it's finding those ways that you can do something that's not, a take, a little bit of give, and you will find that you get an even greater balance of equity in doing so. But Gilda, you got all the relationships.
Well, first of all, what area are you in the firm?
So I'm in a group within HR called Goldman Sachs University, so I lead
Goldman Sachs University. They are always doing something new. Okay. It's been 100 years since I've been there, but I was just curious. How long have you been there?
15 years.
I'm trying to recruit a leadership and development professional. See me afterwards. Got to keep working.
I hear you.
There's a whole contingent of us here. As you guys know, Edith was one of our honorees,
Yeah.
and so
Yes.
we're here like buslow deep.
Yes.
And it's our first time, so we're very excited.
Bettina is Goldman too.
Really?
Yes.
Learning and development?
No.
Okay. Relationships we're talking about.
Even for me, it's hard. It's hard. Being an entrepreneur, given that my schedule is crazy. I mean, for instance, I just flew in here today. I just landed from the West Coast today. I have an elderly father who I'm dealing with, and so it's hard, but it's important, and I recognize that. So even if it means when people reach out to me, because I get a lot of emails, and even if it means me just responding to a person on email to say no, I do a lot of saying no, unfortunately, particularly when it comes to Misty. But people remember that, and I've gotten emails back from people saying, I never expected to get a personal email from you because I'm sure you get a ton. Mm-hmm. So even if it's the little things, getting back to people, responding, even if it's to say no, I'm trying as best I can, given my schedule, to reconnect with people I haven't talked to in quite some time. And it makes me happy and proud when somebody like Debbie Mitchell, who used to be a producer at CBS This Morning, or whatever it was back then, CBS Early Show.
Right,
That's what it was.
right.
She reached out to me a few days ago. I hadn't talked to Debbie in years. And I didn't even know she was living in Orlando, but she was a producer who I often pitched when she was at the Early Show. I didn't get a ton of bookings with her, but I did some. But the bottom line is that was years ago, and the fact that she said, I saw you coming to the Black Enterprise Women of Power Conference. I live here now, would love to grab a coffee. And we're going to try to do that. I don't know if we'll be successful, but the fact that that connection was there years later, that's how you do it. So even if it's just responding to people, even if it's getting together when you have, I am famous for when I drop into a city, I let people know, and I'll set up a schedule, a day or two of scheduling meetings and sitting down, just even if it's just not to discuss business, but it's those connections you never know that they will last you a lifetime. And I know they've done that for me.
So if I can add one other thing, Sharon. Before we had Facebook and LinkedIn and certain information out there, one of the things that I did was I remembered people's birthdays. So I have a friend who used to say Sabina was the greeting before there were e-greetings, because that was my thing, right? If I just sent you a recognition, and I actually do that for every single person in my organization in the company, I send them a personalized email to wish them happy birthday and their company anniversary. Not just my direct reports, everyone in my organization. I make it a point to know that. So you find a little thing that matters, that makes it a little bit different for you, and they'll remember that interaction with you. So if I find out your birthday, you're getting an email.
Or even if it's just to say congratulations on LinkedIn, thanks to LinkedIn, we see promotions. Even if it's just sending them a quick shout out to say congratulations on the promotion. Things like that, you just never know how things touch people and what that will lead to. I have turned down projects where that same person will say, look, you got back to me, you gave me an explanation. I am deeply honest with people. If you come to me and you say, I've got this, that, and the other product, and I want to get it out in 2 months, and I want the national this and that, I'm very honest to say, A, I don't think that that's my area. B, I don't think that's realistic. Here's what I recommend that you do. And C, here's someone you could possibly talk to. Right. I've gotten jobs from the people that I've turned down. So,
if you do it well, it does work.
Do it well.
Other questions?
Yes.
Yes, right here.
Oh, go ahead. She's got the mic.
Mic is coming to you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Van Taylor, and I have a company called Protégé Enterprise, which is a marketing and consulting company. And I wanted to ask the panel if you have any words of advice for someone who is completely in the process of reinventing themselves. I recently retired from Geico after 19 years, and my focus was always IT. So I'm on a faith journey now. Just like you, I walked away from the money, and now I'm looking at doing things for me. So I just want to know if you had any words of advice.
The network that you have had, tap them. Because I was shocked when I decided to go on my own. I was confident that I could do it, but I was shocked at the numbers of people who stepped forward once I spoke the words, I'm going to go on my own and this is what I want to do. So for the people who were like, you're crazy, it's an economic downturn, what are you doing? There was this other group of people who stepped up and said, what can we do to help? A former assistant of mine who was then a publicity manager at Simon & Schuster, she hired me to do press releases. It was great because, while I was building the business, while it wasn't that much money, while I was building the business, that supplemental income helped me do what I needed to do. So that was a former assistant. A good friend of mine who's a publicist said, hey, I know publicist so-and-so over at publishing house so-and-so. She needs a publicist for her author who needs outside help. I want to refer you for that. So you never know what that existing network can do for you, but you have to tell them. You have to tell people what you need, what you're looking to do. And that was the key for me. I don't say this to gloat, I've never had to go out there and pound the pavement in 10 years. It's all been referral based. One good job leads to another good job and another good job and another good job. And that was all based on tapping my network.
And don't forget, so those 19 years at Geico and in technology remains valuable in whatever you're doing. Translate that discipline, whatever those skills are, into the new endeavor that you have.
Okay. So I think we have about 5 minutes left. Take a few more questions, and then let's just do one answer so we can get more questions in. Please.
Hello, I'm April Taylor. I work in HR with Humana. And I'm just curious about how you think the anatomy of the corporate athlete changes with the use of technology. So if you're not in the office, if you are work at home or in a field environment, how do you step up to show yourself and say, I'm ready for that new opportunity? Put me in the game when you can technically only see me on email and instant message.
Make the investment and get in front of people. We are still human beings. So while I will tell you, I am not a digital native, right? And so the way you know you are not a digital native is if you were ever physically the remote control, you were not a digital native. However, what I will also say is that, at least for me, because I'm responsible for all of the virtual meeting capabilities at Pfizer. That's one of my accountabilities. And I tell people all the time, that is a convenient way to get work done, but you still have to make the time to get in front of people face to face. So sometimes you might have to do it on your dime if you don't have the travel budget. You must, we're still human. We like that interaction. So I think you still have to find ways in which not only are you making those interactions, but you're vocalizing what you want to do. There are people who are expecting someone to know what's in their head, that I want to do X, Y, Z next. You have to put that out there, just as Gilda said. You have to share. And so then by sharing and communicating, there's almost a accountability that you've established with that recipient of that information.
Good, thank you. Another question? Anybody?
You had a question, miss?
The lady in the second row, please. None of us know.
We both know, Audra. I saw your hand.
Audra Bohannon from Corn Ferry. My question is, when listening to what you've shared with us, you've shown risk-taking, you've shown courage, you've shown vision, but and you also you've shown authenticity. I want to bring two pieces together, and that is, how did you figure out how to be authentic and also to be politically sophisticated? Because sometimes what happens is that we think it's an either or, and we become righteous. And when we become righteous, we lose focus, and people don't necessarily support us the way we want them to.
That's an excellent
We have time
question.
for both of you to answer that.
Okay, go ahead, Gilda.
Loaded,
no, you
right?
go first on that one.
Yeah, thank you, Audra. Thank you, Audra.
Okay, I got
figuring it
this is
out.
a fantastic.
It is.
That
Yeah,
is
it
a
is.
fantastic
It is.
question. I think for me, part of it is I erred on the side of. I think I erred a little bit on the conservative side to get more of that that sophistication and savvy, and then just sort of turn the dial slightly in terms of the authenticity and knowing what is acceptable. Because you can't just go all in and think that you can just show up a certain way when that's not the corporate anatomy, right? That's not how the corporation works. So for me, I found that it was really important to at least bring in that sophistication and the savvy. And I don't know, how many people here grew up in a city? How many people grew up in a city? Because I'm in technology, so I always talk to young people to get more young people into information technology. And what I share with them is that it's really important to bring everything that you have learned along the way with you. So I grew up in New York City. And I say, if anyone took the subway, okay, in New York City, your brain consumes so much information in order for it to determine whether or not you're getting out that car, on the subway car, you move into the end of the car, you go into the next car because of that person, you're crossing the platform. All of that your brain does in a split second. And what I mean by that is it has tuned my savvy of emotional intelligence in the environment at work. So bringing those skill sets that you learn, and you don't have to be from a city to learn that, but those situations that cause you to build those capabilities, I've leveraged that, and then turned up more and more of the Sabina as I've gone along.
That is a tough question for me, partly because I feel like I'm still kind of learning.
Well, we're always learning. Always.
I will say that my biggest lesson learned with this very topic was, and for those of you from Goldman, I don't know how it is now, but back when I was there, you were encouraged to speak up. Like I remember the whole thing about if you see an issue, I don't care if you're in the mailroom, speak up. We want to hear your ideas. Is it still that way? Okay. Speak up, and we want to hear your ideas. And so growing up at Goldman over the course of, I didn't make it as long as you. I was there for almost 6 years, but 6 years was a lifetime for me at that point. I went into book publishing, which was a very different environment. I don't think I appreciated how different it was going to be, because Goldman was really my second kind of real job outside of government. And so I grew up at Goldman, right? And so I go into publishing, and I go in with the Goldman idea of, if you see something that needs to be done or can be done a different way to be more productive, you say something. And that wasn't acceptable at all in publishing at Penguin at that time. Not to mention, I went from being in more of a leadership position at Goldman to being like just a, I went from being like a senior, whatever my title was at Goldman, to just being a publicist because I was entering the industry. So I had to do a lot of adjusting to understand my environment. So I guess that was the number one step for when you're trying to figure it out, is know your audience. And I had to really understand who my new audience was, that I couldn't just, boldly speak out all the time and say, no, that's wrong, we shouldn't do it that way. Because at Goldman, you speak with such confidence, like, I know what we're going to do it this way. And we don't have time to fuss about it because we know we need to get this done. And it was just a very different environment. So politically, that was how I had to work it. Like, I had to understand this new environment and then adjust accordingly. And then, like Sabina said, add in more of the Gilda with the more experience and time that I was there.
That was a good one, Audra. Thank you. And how much? This is about it? Okay. So we are out of time. We won't do any more questions. By way of housekeeping, first of all, please give my panelists a round of applause.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you all. Thank you
thank
very
you.
much for sharing
Thank you.
everything. So here's how this rolls now. What's going to happen is, I know that some of you want to have a follow-up question with our panelists. But as you see by the extra chair, they're going to start the next session immediately. So I'm going to ask my panelists to step lively out the back doors,
You don't gotta
so
go
that
home.
the crowds follow you there and not in here.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's amazing that we still learn from each other at this stage in our career.
Oh, gosh.
But then, when somebody says, I have a plane ticket to give away, I'm like, my ladies are getting a plane ticket. So let's pay attention.